Next, we come on to our final segment of the month, and that is the media picks. And this month, I actually belatedly looked into a particular media pick because of a conversation that was started in October. So we're going to link below to a couple of articles. One of which, this are a couple of links. The article of which comes from the New York Times, and talks about reclaiming on Netflix an ancient battle beloved of Germany's far right. This is, of course, the Teterberg Forest Massacre that took place in 9 AD. Um, I think on my birthday in 9 AD. I think on the 11th of September.
And
Uh,
there's the wonderful image in Suetonius of the Emperor Augustus stalking the corridors of his palace in Rome at night, screaming at the gods, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions."
exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
three Roman legions were destroyed by German tribes under Arminius, which was Germanicized to Hermann,
Mm.
and gave a name to people like Hermann Goring. But he who had actually been an officer in the Roman auxiliaries.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was it's a fascinating story.
It's a
But as
fascinating
you say,
it's a fascinating story, and its place in history is very important in so much as it made the Roman project reassess the impetus for expansion. It had to rethink where it was going, what it was doing next in terms of the northern
and
frontier.
and arguably created the Rhine frontier, military
Mm,
frontier, which was so heavily garrisoned that one argument for the invasion of Britain in AD 43 is that it was to secure a corn supply
mm,
across the North Sea and down the Rhine for the Rhine armies.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it had very far-reaching consequences at the
Mm.
time and subsequently.
And so it absolutely crucial. And the article here, though, is highlighting the fact that this is it's a German language production.
Mhm.
It does have an English dub, a fairly bad English dub, to be honest, on
I'd rather watch.
Netflix.
Well, let us watch subtitles.
There are subtitles as well. It's just the default is to
Yeah,
play it in English, and it's
I
got
know. I'm
some
sorry,
quite
default
dodgy
the
things in.
subtitles and choose the English if you want, because the dubs always are rubbish.
Well, not always, but in this instance,
Almost
they're
always.
not
Okay,
great.
almost always.
Almost always. Um, And what's interesting about it, though, is how the reason why I'm highlighting this is it brought to the fore three key strands, and I'll just briefly go through them. The first one is how, yes, as the article here says, the far right is going, oh, yes, a story about Germans being Germanic and heroic staving off the might of Rome and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And as someone actually on the Facebook page, the Archaeosoup Facebook page, they pointed this out. This isn't really a news story. Right wing Germans like Germanic things like it. So in that sense, it's not surprising.
Have they
Um,
never heard of the Arna Nerba? Yes.
exactly, exactly.
Who are those villains in the indie movies? In the first one in
Oh,
particular.
ah, um,
You know who
yeah,
I mean. You know who I mean.
yeah, those guys,
You know
yeah,
who we mean, dear viewer,
yeah,
don't you?
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that element of it, which though is not, as far as I can tell, remotely the focus of the TV series.
No,
That's not
absolutely
what
not.
their
They've
agenda
gone
is.
out of their way to make that clear.
Yeah. The second thing which is interesting to me, though, in this is in this conversation is the way in which people um, react to it by saying, for example, it's just a TV series, it's not a documentary. Calm down, this kind of thing, and trying to effectively negate any examination or conversation surrounding the presentation of the past in a TV series. Now, this is something which you and I often go back and forth on, for example, when it comes to things like Game of Thrones. Um, and in this instance, I think, from my point, I would say it's quite okay, especially on an archaeological forum, for archaeologists to be going, is this any good from an archaeological perspective? I think that's all right, isn't it? Surely.
Yeah, look, one of my proudest days as a budding archaeologist in the late 1970s and early 1980s was when I went to a cinema release of Ben-Hur, and the one of the scenes early in the film in the House of Hur in Jerusalem, there's a very nice alabaster jar on a table which has been copied from one of the alabaster jars from the tomb of Tutankhamun.
Mm.
And I spotted
Oh.
that. Oh, I know where they got that from.
Hmm.
He was
Hmm.
Ben-Hur was an antique collector.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep. Antiquarian.
and yeah. So yeah, I mean, and also I think we have to be clear that there is a tradition of epic historical movies and TV series that are done for political reasons.
Hmm.
For example, there's a subgenre at the moment that is available. That they're available on Netflix of epic action adventures set, for example, at the foundation of the Ottoman Empire,
Mm.
which is about Turkish nationalism,
Mm.
and particularly under the current president Erdogan.
Yeah.
Indian movies of various languages play to those tropes as well.
Hmm.
Um,
And as we
and
were
in
discussing in an earlier segment, for example, the Chinese state not wanting to present Genghis Khan in a favourable
ab-
light, or even mention him.
absolute,
Yeah.
absolutely, and there have been political controversies, for example, about movies like wonderful movies like House of Flying Daggers and things like
Mm.
that,
Mm. Yeah.
where uh, but and going back a bit further, under Mussolini, the Italian film industry was churning out epics about the Roman
Mm.
Empire, and even as the Third Reich was collapsing, um, Goebbels was transferring not just millions of Reichsmarks, but thousands of German soldiers to be extras in a film about the fight of the Prussians against Napoleon in 1812.
Mm. Yeah. Mm.
Um, uh, uh,
So the theatre of nationalism is absolutely part
Plays
of
out
this. Yeah.
absolutely. The theatre and the cinema of nationalism absolutely plays out in these things. So we have to hold up a measure to these productions and say, what is it actually saying for now?
Mm. And that
Um,
that actually brings me to my third strand, in so much as I couldn't help but observe, given that the second strand we've established it's okay to observe this sort of stuff. In the third strand, I couldn't help but observe a weird. I've only watched the first episode and a bit more beyond that, so a little bit into the second episode. Um, and it's a slightly strange thing whereby, possibly because of the dub, it feels a bit like a cartoon. But that might just be the dub. But certainly, there's this presentation of Rome that was, on the one hand, actually okay in terms of. Sorry, I mean the impact of Rome. So we're seeing a local garrison and its effect
yeah,
on a village in what is now Germany. Um, it was, broadly speaking, okay. Some of the details of the armor, you could go, ugh, that's not quite right. That's not quite right. But I'm happy to put that to one side. What I found more interesting and a bit more, as it were, baldly um, curious, was the the way that Rome is presented as. So the opening sprawl of the TV series, and presumably each episode says something along the lines of, oh, well, certainly at the beginning of the first one, the Roman army was the greatest army ever created in the world, and this kind of thing.
yeah,
So on the one hand, there again, we're back to this notion of the military machine, which we discussed on previous watching
yeah.
briefs, and why that's a flawed focus when it comes to Rome. But then also, our noble savages, our Barbarians, the TV series is of course called Barbarians. I didn't mention that, but
Mm,
it is. Our Barbarians are able to infiltrate a camp and steal an eagle. Not a particularly original plot point, but they're doing it by appealing to the soldiers' weaknesses. Their weakness being pleasures of the flesh. So they tempt, at one point, one of the barbarian heroes is going, "You want an orgy? You want an orgy?" Which is the straight. I almost wanted just to capture that as a
I'm getting
meme.
visions here. Not that I've ever watched any, but the stories you hear about sort of 70s German porn movies. But anyway, that's
Indeed, we're here to fix your.
are they all
Yeah,
sort of cute and blonde with tight little blonde Zapata moustaches?
actually, yes. Actually, in this instance, yes. Anyway, the point is that you have this brutish but buffoon idea of Rome. Mighty but also deeply flawed, in a way that then the barbarians are not portrayed as. The barbarians are portrayed as living an authentic lifestyle, wanting to be, one with the gods, and yes, having some back and forth.
Yeah.
But ultimately, for example, when it comes to the romantic scene that's in the first episode, it's a meeting of equals, the strong woman and the and so on and so forth. There's also the portrayal of some details, which actually someone did say on the Facebook page, that is coming directly out of 19th and early 20th century ideas about Germany and German archaeology. So things like there's a portrayal of a scene where bride price is being discussed, and this woman is being sort of examined, her teeth and her hips, and so on and so forth, which evidence shifts around. Again, there are problems with looking at Iron Age Europe um, in any part of the world. So, for example, people often look at the Torn and think that that maps back onto Iron Age Ireland, for example. So some of these details they're extrapolating from arguably outdated sources. But I think what I found interesting,
And even talking about Germany, even when you've got an apparently contemporary source like Tacitus's Germania,
yeah,
that is highly, you have
that's
to use that
biased.
highly circumspectly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and in that sense, we don't know to what extent, Tacitus, for example, observing Britain, had any actually understanding of what he was looking at.
Because he was filtering it probably through his father-in-law
Yeah,
and
yeah,
his experience in the Roman military under
precisely, yeah.
Agricola.
Well, and also,
Yeah.
I mean, even right down to the names. The idea that
Mm,
Toggy Dubnus is actually the real name of a king, as opposed to a
yeah.
Romanized version of what they're hearing. Anyway, so there are issues of how the sources are examined, but I think coming back to this question that you asked, this notion of what is it saying now for today? Why is this?
Mm.
What is the currency of this thing that's been made? I would say you can see why it is that this question of, is this a German nationalistic perspective on Rome
Mm.
and the influence of Rome? Um, why that question is being asked, because
I
it is definitely portraying Rome as fatally flawed.
I think it's really interesting, because if you look at oh, and by the way, when I said under Agricola, I meant, of course, his father-in-law Agricola. But anyway, that's Tacitus. No, if you look at just looking at English language versions of the Roman army,
Yeah.
and I'll give you two examples. One is the movie Spartacus,
Hmm.
which was made by Stanley Kubrick, produced by Kirk Douglas, who also played the hero Spartacus.
Hmm.
Everybody probably has seen it, or at least everybody knows the "I am Spartacus" meme that has become just such a ubiquitous thing. If you look at film historians looking at it, have made the point that it's unusual in Hollywood epics of that time because there's no mention of Christianity in films like Quo Vadis and Ben-Hur and so on. It's about the triumph of Christianity over pagan Rome and so on. Spartacus isn't that. Spartacus is a very political film.
Mm.
It's about slavery and freedom,
Yeah.
but it's also seen as a Zionist movie. It's about this small group of people trying to find the promised land. They don't get there in the end,
No.
although you're left with a moment of hope when the Roman slave dealer, played by Peter Ustinov, actually helped Zionists help Spartacus's now wife and young baby escape, even as they're walking under the crucified slaves on the Appian Way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So but it's not a triumph of Christianity movie like Ben-Hur.
Mm.
But there again, it's interesting. But the Romans, as a very Hollywood thing, the senior Romans are played by British actors, Charles Lawton, Peter Ustinov, and above all Laurence Olivier as Crassus.
Yeah.
And they're played as professional soldiers. There's a brilliant scene when just before the final battle, when Crassus is briefing the Roman senior officers, and it's just professionals doing their job.
Mm.
And Crassus said, we're going to get this job done, guys, and this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
It's absolutely, okay, it's his political value, but so there's that, and I contrast that with a miniseries that was made in the 1980s called Masada, which was ostensibly again about the siege of Masada in 70. Well, they followed the siege of Jerusalem in 71.
Mm-hmm.
So it's meant to be the last stand of the Jewish rebels in the Roman province of Palestine.
Yeah.
Foundation myth of modern Israel.
Hmm.
Members of the IDF still take their oath of allegiance on top of Masada.
Right. Yes.
Masada shall not fall again.
Mm.
But there it's very interesting because again the Romans are led by Pietro O'Toole as the Roman commander, are played as professionals doing a job.
Mm.
Their job is to finish off this rebellion, take the the fortress, and actually the portrayal of the zealots is quite ambivalent. They're
Mm.
seen as a bunch of fanatics, and are they actually gaining anything by doing this?
No. Yeah.
By forcing this bloodletting, and ultimately by this mass suicide. Now you
Mm.
could argue that in modern culture, certainly in the state of Israel, they have, but it forces you to ask the questions.
Yeah.
And it was also about colonial. Actually, I met one other final, the Eagle, based on Rosemary Sutcliffe's Eagle of the Ninth,
Mm.
where the opening allusion to that is a boat going down a river in the same way that the fast boats went upriver in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Rome is the colonial power. Rome is fighting this grubby colonial war in the, in the wilds of Exeter,
Yeah. And
around Exeter.
the Kelty Kong are hiding in the forest and this kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So in that sense, and actually this actually ties in with a part of a conversation I was having with Adrian Maldonado a few days ago, about depictions of, in particular, Rome and Picts in that instance. In so much as often Rome and the portrayal of Rome is it's unavoidably a commentary on how people at the time view themselves and their place in society and the world. And,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
in this instance, then, um, perhaps I need to watch more to understand why the Romans are being portrayed the way they are.
I'm certainly wanting to watch
Mm,
it because I think it sounds fascinating. I mean, when you flagged it up, I thought, oh, that's interesting. 'Cause it's a story I've always been interested in. And
mm,
in fact, again, if people want to read around the Roman army on the Rhine, as well as the technical, archaeological stuff, read Lindsay Davis's Falco thriller called The Iron Hand of Mars, which is set on the Rhine frontier and is brilliant.
okay,
It involves an aurochs.
really
Yes.
interesting. Wow. Okay, well I'll check that out. Interesting.
Yeah, Lindsay Davis, The Iron Hand of Mars.
Iron Hand of Mars. Okay, what is your media pick, Mr. Brockman? Is it something that's equally sort of dramatic, or is it a bit more
No,
serious?
it's the opposite. It's sort of serious, and it's about some very dramatic stories, but it's actually very simple. And it's the repeat on BBC4 next week, which will subsequently be on BBC iPlayer, um, of episodes of the series War Walks fronted by
Walks.
War Walks.
Walks. Okay, yeah.
It's a it is not the easiest title to say.
No.
Wound and wound the wagged wassail wan.
Do you know,
It sounds
actually, in the northeast of England, war walks would mean our walks.
of course,
Yeah,
yes,
war. Yeah, it's like
as in War Jackie,
WOOR.
yeah, as in War Jackie and all that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Anyway, war
Um,
walks.
right, yeah, War Walks, which was a series. The first episode went out in the summer of 1996. It was fronted by the late Professor Richard Holmes,
Hmm.
who had a formidable career both as an academic but also uh, ending up as the most senior territorial, i.e., volunteer, part-time soldier in the British Army.
Nice.
He taught British Army officers and soldiers as an academic, specialised in military history. War Walks was an incredibly well-received series at the time and has held its reputation in the 25 years since. Because basically he went out onto the ground, walked a battlefield, explained what happened, but also why it happened, what influenced he did the basic academic thing of who, what, when, where, why.
Hmm.
But he did it incredibly loosely. He was one of those people who you could just put in front of a camera and they could just make something absolutely clear and compelling.
Hmm.
So few academics can do it. and they did it to a degree with Time Team, the way Time Team was cast. There are other examples. The classic, if you like, he was a military history version of David Attenborough in terms of his ability to be loved by the camera and talk to an audience through the camera.
Okay, so
And I would
kind of like
urge
a
anybody.
Carl Sagan, then that kind of thing.
Carl Sagan, yeah, no, Carl Sagan had it too.
Yeah.
Absolutely, one of my great heroes in broadcasting and in science.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think there is a huge amount that modern TV producers could learn from this kind of presentation. It's about getting your casting right, which doesn't mean getting casting a major Hollywood actor.
No.
They
get low key is no longer low key.
No, he's not. He's probably seen magic actually.
But nonetheless, so instead of casting a Hollywood actor, or for example, your Suggs equivalent to get attention
this is
on
it.
a series,
Exactly. You don't need the everyman, because the presenter wears their knowledge so lightly they can be the everyman.
Yeah.
That's why Sagan was so brilliant. It's why Attenborough was so brilliant. It's why Richard Holmes was so brilliant.
Yeah. And it's interesting, if you don't mind me just sort of putting a little thought in there, in so much it's interesting how that was one of the first bits of advice I was ever given when it came to essay writing, serious essay writing at uni, as opposed to what I'd experienced previously at high school, was that you avoid jargon. You don't need to prove how smart you are through the words you use. You need to be able to describe and explain what you're thinking, and why you think that, and how you come to that conclusion in language that anyone can understand. And
it's absolutely. It's what I'm always saying. It's archaeologists need to learn how to talk human.
Yeah.
You don't talk about heritage assets. You talk about our past.
Yes.
Yeah. And so on. And as I say, even some of these niches, apparently niches, military history, Holmes was able to do that. The episodes next week, they go out from Monday to Friday. It's the episodes about the 20th century, and there is slightly odd order, because it opens with possibly one of the most famous battles of the 20th century on the Somme. Then it goes to a Second World War battle at Arras in the invasion in 1940, and then it goes back to the First World War for Mons. And there are others. But I do urge people to watch at least one, because it's even if you're not interested in military history, it's a textbook example in how a good interpreter can tell a historical story in a compelling way, without gimmicks, without loads of CGI, without loads of cheesy, cheap reenactments of people who don't look anything like Hitler, but with a toothbrush moustache slamming the table.
Yeah.
History Channel, I am looking at you.
Yeah.
It's TV production.
Well, also, I don't mean to extend this section for too far, but I'm just curious. What then is what's your thoughts on that strange historical past present tense that people tend to use in those sorts of dramatizations of the past? So when they're saying, Herr Hitler was very annoyed, and they show someone banging a table, where they'll say was, or rather they'll say is very annoyed. Right now, as he is doing this across the courtyard, so and so is loading a Luger. This kind of thing. Do you think that's a similarly effective tool, or not? In so much as what you've been describing there is someone who has a mastery of the facts and therefore is relatable and can relate what they're saying to the audience very effectively. Is having a present tense approach as effective in these sorts of televisual attempts?
This is really interesting. This is when you get into literary style and so on. And I have used the historic present. We use it in the book, the Burma Spitfires book, still available from your local bookseller. Please support them during the lockdown. Buried Spitfires of Burma by Andy Brockman and Tracy Spate, published by the History Press. Will
you sign it for a £5?
The logistics of that at the moment, we would love to have done a proper book launch and book tour and signing at our local bookshops. And the logistics at the moment, and everybody involved in it's just horrific, and pe- poor people trying to run, you know, keep that part of the economy going.
Yeah.
They're working like Trojans and doing their level best, and particularly your local bookshop. Please support them if you can. There's a new law. In fact, there's a new organisation called Bookshop.org, which has just launched in the UK. It launched a short while ago in the United States. It's designed to enable local bookshops to compete with a certain large international provider whose name shall not be mentioned. Tick.
Yes. Well,
Um,
actually, yeah, and I think I shared a link to them this month,
yeah,
actually.
yeah,
Anyway, I've distracted you there. Sorry. The present tense.
no, the historic present. I think it can be useful in dramatic terms, and what it can be useful for in storytelling terms is establishing what somebody did or didn't know at a particular moment.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you can say, the guy with the toothpaste moustache was making this decision at this moment, but he didn't know that simultaneously in Washington it was being decided that
Mm, mm,
that's useful.
yeah.
And it's a way of constructing a story.
Yeah.
And as I say, and I say many, many times, and I will never stop saying, archaeologists and historians have to be storytellers as well as analysts.
Mm.
And that means if it's appropriate, you can play with the forms.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting.
That's good enough.
Yeah. I think, and for the record, I think I tend to agree. I think, yeah, particularly when you have stories about where there is granular information, where we know through communique and through official records and so on and so forth. I mean, one of the stories that comes to mind is is it Selby, the infamous Cold War double
Philby.
agent? Philby, not Selby.
Kim
Philby.
Kim 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 Phil Kim
Kim
Philby. Yeah.
Philby, yeah,
Yeah.
Kim Philby, where
Yeah.
the most effective documentary I've ever seen on that was told as it was unfolding, and it was not
Mm.
every event was dramatized, but what you had was a sense of why it was that people at the time didn't go,
Mm.
"You are." You
Hey,
are clearly
yeah.
playing both sides, kind of
Yes.
thing.
Well, not played both sides. He was playing for one side. It's just the other side thought it was his side because
Well,
they were his side.
sorry, yeah, yeah. So yeah, you're clearly ingratiating yourself to us when
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
uh, and it was interesting in that sense to see how
Was that Ben McIntyre's documentary
I
about
think
him?
it was, yeah, yeah, and
Yeah. No, Ben McIntyre is a master of that kind of storytelling.
he was
He's done it
brilliant,
in a number of documentaries now.
yeah,
Yeah.
and in that
Yeah.
sense he lays out who knew what when and why this
Yeah.
particular meeting has, what the
Yeah.
stakes are in this particular moment, um,
Mm.
and and then you also get it also frees him up in that moment. So this is now, I suppose, this is a meta-analysis of presentation on TV, but I think this is probably worthwhile to one or two viewers at least.
Yeah.
Um, what you have then
The
is
ones that
the
haven't wandered off to make a cup of coffee.
what you have is the space then as well.
Or switch to see if the American election's finished yet.
It hasn't. I was just checking. It hasn't. What you have as well is, although Biden's just taken a lead in Pennsylvania, if you're
Ooh.
interested, it's now 10-4 on the 6th of November, um, UK time. Anyway, so what you have though is that he creates the space there as well as clearly a modern person talking in the present about the past, the space to make comments on actually this moment here, this press conference that Kim Philby held is used today in spy school. It's used in MI5 and so on and so forth to say just how well people can lie, because he's so charismatic and he carries it off so effortlessly that it's a tour de force of subterfuge, and to have that
Also, I
little
point out he was a
insight.
public school educated journalist.
Well, yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and as we know, you can get away with an awful lot of stuff if you're a public school educated journalist who may or
Exactly.
may not have wanted to build a garden bridge at some point. Um, but and so in that sense, it's interesting to have that, and then before the press conference unfolds in the narrative, so you're given that little bit of information. Watch this carefully. This is a masterful performance that you're about to see. So yeah, I think there's room for playing with form and format, isn't there? Mm.
Yes. Yes.
Well, we have managed to record our watching brief on a day when I won't go into specifics, but Andy is feeling rather tired today. I'm still feeling quite washed out and a little bit poorly from having had a week-long virus. I think we deserve to pat ourselves on the back. I think well done, well done us. Uh, and hopefully, folks at home, you've enjoyed this as well. Any comments? Please do comment below. Any suggestions for media or news stories you want us to cover in the coming weeks? Please do get in touch. And I guess all that remains to say is look after one another. Really, as we just alluded to, we don't know what's happening in the US yet. We know we're about to go into a very difficult time here, in particular in England, and in different parts of the UK, having different rules at different times with regards to this pandemic. Be kind, I suppose I would
Be
say.
kind, and if you're not feeling too good, talk to somebody else, please.
Yes.
There's lots of help out there, not just
Mm,
in your friends and family, but elsewhere. So yeah,
yeah,
take it easy, and see you next month.
will do. Yeah, definitely. Uh, can I just add, just quickly, on that note, when we were preparing the agenda for this month's watching brief, it became clear that I just needed to have a chat. So basically, yeah, just talk to people if you need to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Bye. See you next month.
Bye.